I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander, and we'd like to talk to you in the next few minutes about cultivating the grace to accept. In our lives, we are all from time to time faced with challenges and difficulties. We are all faced with physical infirmities and limitations. We're all faced with financial difficulties. We're all faced with challenges and with opportunities to learn from the experiences of life. But I think so often we need to understand that there is nothing wrong with accepting where we are in life, and that is the beginning point from which we can begin to move into new directions.
Yes, and there's all ways of accepting, and there's all ways of giving. And some people have to give monetarily, and some can't afford to give monetarily, but they can give in other ways. So we have to have the grace to accept whatever anyone is able to offer us. And as we accept, if we don't accept, then we short-circuit our own receiving and our own opportunity for accepting or receiving. But when we do accept, it keeps the flow going. It's like a flow goes, it's circular, and it goes and comes back again and goes out and comes back again.
Accepting the difficulties and challenges of life is another aspect, and one that we're all faced with from time to time, and accepting the place where we are. And there's a big difference between giving up and giving in life, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And a classic story I've heard is of a lady who was in a wheelchair, and a psychologist was saying in her mind, I would hate to be in that wheelchair. And the lady turned around and said to the psychologist, I know what you're thinking. You'd hate to be in this wheelchair. It's not so bad. And then she told her story about how she had gone through life with a lot of difficulties, a lot of problems. And as she faced those problems, she didn't do it very well and very gracefully for a long time. And then she saw her guardian angel, and her guardian angel spoke with her and told her that worse things were in store for her, but she's always there for her. And her guardian angel handed her some scissors, and she said, you can use these to cut those rubber bands that enfold you. And she saw that her negative thoughts were like rubber bands, just wound round and round and round her. So she said, yes, I want to be free of all that negativity. So she cut the rubber bands, and she felt more free. And then she felt so attuned to her guardian angel. And her guardian and they talked about her life, the past and the present. And then the guardian told her things that would happen in the future, and that she would be in a wheelchair in the last years of her lives. And she said, the lady said, will you be there? And the guardian says, I'll always be with you. I've always been with you. I'll always be with you. She says, I can handle it. Then I can handle anything. So she said, after that wonderful experience of knowing, I'm happier in this wheelchair than I was when I wasn't in the wheelchair for ever so many years. And so that is a very wonderful and true story. And it's a very wonderful way of showing that what you teach so beautifully, it's all in our mind. We live in our minds and not in the world. That lady thought her life was terrible, and it was terrible. And then she thought her life would be wonderful, and it was wonderful.
And the way that we think does determine the quality of our life, and this reality and the importance of the reality of acceptance. And again, we're not talking about giving up, because so often people, when they do have a negative experience, will often give up in the experience, but instead give in to the experience and accept that this is where I am. Now what am I going to do? And what we're going to do is always up to us.
Yeah.
And the truth is that the presence and power of God is the source of all of our good, but that source only gives us guidance and direction, and the action really comes from us. And it's the way that we respond to circumstances and situations. You know, well, Lorena, who was our organist for many years in the church, and Lorena is a great example of understanding the reality and the truth of having the grace to accept situations in life that may not be exactly the way we want them. And certainly in our lives, many things happen that aren't the way that we want them to be. We don't plan for many of the things that happen. But Lorena had reached a point in time in her life of not being able to drive her car, or thinking that she maybe should give up her car. And as we all know, for older people, giving up a car is a traumatic experience. And so one day she had told me, I think I really need to give up my car. And so I was really prepared for all of the kind of negative emotions and feelings that most seniors express at that point in time. But instead, she said, I think I'll get along just fine without the car. And she was rather positive about the fact that she really needed to stop driving and she really needed to start taking public transportation. And as the weeks went by, I would ask her, how are you doing now with the buses? Well, she loved the buses. And she loved the fact that she met people on the bus. And one day when I was driving her home, she told me that it was the best thing that she ever did because it saved her a tremendous amount of expense. It made her have a much more peaceful mind and attitude. It introduced her to a whole new group of people that she learned to meet on the bus, and she saw that as a very positive expression of life. And she was willing to accept the place where she was in her life and to be guided and directed in the way that she should be in this time in her life. And so rather than fighting, rather than struggling, and rather than being in the midst of a negative experience, she kind of, as Hattie Garlish, who founded our church, used to say, she put herself in neutral and said, this is where I am. I'm at a point in life where I need to give up my car. I'm going to give up my car. And I'm going to deal with this in a positive way. And out of it, she found many positive and wonderful things, and she was much happier. Others, as you know and I know, have given up their cars and been bitter and angry and have had the experience really be one of a very negative experience.
Yes, because they think they're giving up their independence, but they're not, because they can do what Lorena did, ride the bus or ride a taxi. I took a class recently on driving, and we were talking about the fact that you can hire a taxi for a lot less money within a year, that if you don't go very much, which most older people don't go that much, and by the time they pay for the car and the insurance and the expenses of driving the car, then they can hire a lot of taxis. But people don't think of it that way because they're thinking of it as giving up their independence, because they can get in that car and go where they wish. Well, a taxi can take them wherever they wish too. But it's just a matter of how we look at life, isn't it?
It's a matter of how we look at life, and it's a matter of how our mind operates in circumstances and situations. We're all going to have difficulties. We're all going to face challenge and change, and that's the one constant that we teach so often. We really need to become change artists, and we need to embrace the reality of change, because if there's one thing in life that is consistent, it is change. And challenge comes in the midst of many of the changes that come into our lives. And so from the time we start in early life and infancy as children, we're constantly changing, we're constantly evolving, we're constantly moving, we're constantly going into another and different phase of life. And I think that we need to be aware of the fact that none of us are going to escape this life without challenge and without difficulty. And so if we're able to work with that challenge and difficulty, and the beginning point of working with any challenge is to accept the place of our present moment and our present circumstance, and then be guided and directed, then be open and receptive, then be led into the places that we need to go.
Yes, and as you said, if we have the grace to accept whatever happens in our life that we think is not very fortunate, then it becomes a fortunate circumstance if we turn it around in our minds and see the good in it. And change is inevitable. We know that we can't all stay 16 years old forever, or even 20 or 30 or 40, but if we just accept that, yes, this is a series of changes that happen in my life. I attended an 80th birthday party for a lady last Sunday who looks as if she's about 50. And that lady is such a beautiful human being because she likes all people all the time, and she reaches out to help people. And she's won awards for being so helpful in her community, our community. And it's because she is always reaching out to help others, has the grace to accept, and she accepts when people help her and want to reach out to her. I know when her husband was ill, many of us would go sit with him so she could get out of the house. And she was so grateful. But she showed her gratitude in a sensible way, just by being simply grateful. And that's a lady who shows in her face and in her bearing someone who's had the grace to accept, but the grace to be grateful all her life. And isn't it true that whatever we are shows in our countenance?
Absolutely. And the dynamic of our life is expressed in our physical being, and our mind and the action of our mind impacts our physical being so much. This lady that you're talking about is a peaceful, happy, relatively healthy person because of
Very.
her mindset, because
That's
of the
right.
way that she thinks.
And she exercises her body. She walks mornings, and she eats thoughtfully, but she eats junk sometimes. You know, she doesn't make a fetish of anything, and that to me is ideal, because when we don't make a fetish of things, but just accept whatever happens, then we're accepting life more fully in all its fullness.
And in the midst of circumstances and situations, we need to open ourselves to what it is that this experience is bringing to us, because every experience brings something to us. And a few moments ago, you mentioned good, which is a very fundamental part of metaphysical philosophy, and that is that good and only good are the reality of what we're going to ultimately experience in our lives. And so, in a negative experience, in a difficult time, when we face a health challenge, when we face limit or lack in our financial resources, we really need to cultivate the process of having our thinking, our mind, looking to what good is going to come out of this. Now, that may sound kind of Pollyannish and hard, especially for people who haven't begun the process of using this way of thinking in the midst of their life experiences. But we can, in fact, look at a negative experience and say, what is the good that's going to come out of this? Because good is going to come out of every experience, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And we can look at unfortunate happenings in our lives as that the future is always going to be brighter without being Pollyannish, but to know that the future is going to be brighter. To know that right now we're in a crisis situation where life is hard and difficult, and we have to accept that someone has died that we love, or that money is not abundant as we would like, or many different things. As we face challenges in life, we face those challenges. If we face them truly and honestly and open and look for the good, then we will see the good. And a lot of people can't see that thing. And I know I've been at points in my own life where I've said verbally, well, I know that you're very bright, but what you're saying will never happen. When I was told that I would come out of travail into great happiness, greater happiness than ever before. But it works that way. It worked that way in my life. It works that way in everyone's life. We just have to know that when things are happening that are so hard to accept, that better things are ahead. And as we accept that, yes, better things are ahead for us, then we're more apt to meet them head on more quickly.
Absolutely. And we'd like to pause at this point in the program and give our viewers an opportunity to receive some literature that will help them to continue the study of the thoughts and ideas that we're sharing with you.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through Confident Living.
Well, we can continue to talk about how we can look for good in the midst of where we're accepting ourselves to be.
As we have the grace to accept whatever is good in life, but if we also have the grace to accept what is bad in life, then what's bad or unpleasant or difficult will seem much less so. If we have the grace to accept it and say, I know this will pass, this too shall pass, to know that we can steer our own lives the way we want them to go, we have the power and the presence to do that, if we will.
And that power comes from mind, doesn't it?
Yes.
And
yes.
it comes through the dynamic of thought.
Yes. And as we realize that, then we're more apt to work with that dynamic, aren't we?
Absolutely. But so many people don't give any thought to the fact that they're creating a world based upon the way in which they think about circumstances and situations. And if in fact we are not in control, or at least not aware of the dynamic of our thinking, then we often don't accept where we are. We don't accept the good that is going to be in each circumstance and situation, and we continually are fighting, continually creating an exhaustion in our lives, and continually overlooking the opportunity that we have to lead happy, healthy, prosperous lives. One good picture of how many of us live our lives is running the opposite direction on an escalator. And so many of us feel that way in life. We feel that life is moving in one direction and we have to go in another, and so we run and we fight and we're trying to make headway. But as we are fighting the circumstances and situations of life, life is bringing more to us, and so we have this escalator effect. And really all we need to do is to stop running, ride the escalator to the top or the bottom, get off and get on the other side and ride it up. And simply getting on the right escalator that's taking us to the right place is a process of mind. It is a situation in which each one of us can cultivate our own thinking, not so that all of our difficulties will go away, but cultivate our way of thinking so that when circumstances and situations present themselves that are not the way we want them to be, when things come into our life experience that bring us pain or suffering, when we're faced with these things, we're able to open our consciousness and open our awareness so that we can receive the guidance and the direction in the midst of this negative circumstance, and great good can come in and fill this negative circumstance or situation.
Yes, and we have to do it ourselves, and we can look to see what makes us happy, what are the things that really is pleasing to us when we're in good times. And one thing is good music. And when people are depressed, they don't want to play good music. But if they would, it would open up new light into their lives. And they can, if they have the opportunity to hear live music, that would be wonderful. Music of a high quality. And then there's so many ways we can just consciously guide ourselves into greater light and happiness.
And in the process, we have to begin by accepting
What's there.
This is where we are.
Yeah.
So often we say when people come for healing, or people come because of depression or because of unhappiness in a relationship, the beginning point of any change and the beginning point of getting the good out of what this experience is bringing to us is to accept where we are and be moved from that place to another and better place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as we do, then we're lifting ourselves and we're lifting others. I can remember years ago, my mentor, when I was a spiritual student years ago, I'm still a spiritual student, we are until we die, but I'd done a lot of things to help her that was helpful to her. And we were on a trip with a group, and she offered me some money, and she said, I want to buy you a nice gift, but I can't get out to shop for it. Would you choose something you really like? And I said, oh, no, I can't accept your money, because I do what I do for you for love, and because I love you and I want to help you all I can. And she said, you have to learn to give, to accept as graciously as you give. And that was a big lesson for me, because we do have to learn to accept as graciously as we give. And sometimes you've said so many times that the giver receives ever so much more than the person to whom we're giving. And that's a prime example of that, because I received so much just from being able to give and to help this lady whom I loved and to whom I was very grateful. And yet she needed to express her gratitude to me, and I needed to accept it in just the way she gave it. So I learned a good lesson there, that we have to allow others to give to us, and then we have to accept in that way.
We have to be willing to accept. We also have to be willing to accept from the divine.
Yes.
And the divine is often giving us much like your mentor.
Yes.
And the Spirit in the presence of God is giving us solutions, is giving us a way, is giving us the lessons that we need to have in the midst of our life experience. And so often we're unconsciously saying exactly what you said to this the spiritual teacher. I couldn't, oh no, I can't do that because I can't. And in fact, what we need to do is to open that channel and be receptive and to accept. To accept the circumstance and situation, to accept the blessing, to accept the guidance, to accept the direction, and to accept the personal responsibility that we have to act and react to circumstances and situations and change where we are into where we want to be.
Yes. And our very openness and gratitude will change that circumstance, won't it?
Yeah.
Most of all, it lies within us, and it lies within how we accept and how we give. And if we give in a way that no one else could do this but us, and we have to do it, well, then we're short-circuiting our own selves. And if we accept in that same way that, oh no, then we're short-circuiting. But if we just accept abundantly, and your example of the universe giving is so wonderful, and it's so important that we realize that we don't accept from the universe what's our just due. And it's just like we say, oh, if someone offers us something, we say, oh, give that to someone who really needs it. We're always thinking of trying to give to those who really need it. Well, a lot of people who might really need material things might be far richer in just pure goodwill feeling than those who have a lot, but they want to always give to others they can't accept.
Mm-hmm. And that ability to accept and to give and to accept what is being given to us is really very difficult when we find ourselves at a low point in life.
Yes. Norman Vincent Peale gave an example of that. There was a lady who was their housekeeper, and she gave to poor families in their name, in the name of him and his wife, and they had really, it was a very wonderful experience that this lady had of taking, and she personally took the gifts to a needy family, and I think she asked a policeman who needed something, who needed Christmas gifts, and she asked someone who would know, who really needed help, and then she did it in the name of Norman Vincent Peale and his wife. And that's a very lovely way that we can give. Mm-hmm. We can give in ever so many ways, and we can always know that the flow is abundant. We are the one who limits.
We limit through our way of thinking so often.
Yes. And if we do limit, then we're short-circuiting our own good. But if we do give in a bountiful way, whether it's a very small amount or a large amount, and fully and freely, then we're leaving the floodgates open to flow back into our own lives. And if we can remember that everything is just circular, it just goes around and comes, what goes around comes around is a trite saying, and we say that a lot, but it's so true. And as we give, we can give in ever so many ways. It's not just giving money or specific food or advice, but there's so many ways that we give out to others.
And we give out to others really in many ways by accepting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the grace to accept. And when we have the grace to accept, then we make that abundant flow keep going. It keeps going. It doesn't just stop with us, it keeps going.
Accepting our good is, for many people, very, very difficult. So one of the things we know from sociologists and psychologists is the fact that so many people have great difficulties with self-esteem. And we believe ourselves unworthy so often of the good that comes into our lives. And that lack of acceptance of that aspect of our lives, of receiving and being worthy of goodness, really sets us up in many cases and in many ways for the negative experiences that we have in life.
Yes, and when you were talking about self-esteem, I remember my oldest son, who's now quite, he's not young anymore, but when he was very young, we were going to visit family or friends, and he said, "Won't they be glad to see us?" And that was very dear, because he was so sure he was going to be welcomed, and he was. But I think that's a way that we could go through life. Won't they be glad to see us wherever it is, where we're going, whether we're going shopping or we're going to work or wherever we're going to be? If they will be glad to see us because we bring light and love and good cheer and we know people who we feel that way about, don't we?
And people who do bring good cheer are usually people who are willing to accept any circumstance or situation.
Exactly.
Even
right.
the negative ones. And they somehow are able to overcome, aren't they?
Yes. And also to accept the good that comes their way in a wholesome, healthy, open-handed way. And not just, no, I couldn't accept that because I couldn't do that. but just to accept openly whatever's given them, and then they can pass it on if they wish to, and they do pass it on in a certain way. If not the material goods, then in other ways they pass it on. So when you have a community of people who are loving and outgoing, when you have a school that's that way, or if the school is just dominated by a principal or teachers who are too strong and too strict, and they don't allow, or family, it would be the same thing. Well, then they're short-circuiting all the good that's available from the universe, which isn't necessary to short-circuit. Just to be open and loving and accepting and have the grace to give, the grace to accept equally is makes for a wonderful life.
Yeah. And as we accept the circumstances and situations of life, we want to be sure before we get away today that we're are impressing upon people that we're in no way talking about the giving up kind of aspect. We're talking about giving in to circumstances and situations, not giving up, not wringing our hands in the midst of bad experiences, but accepting the fact that this is where we are. If we're depressed, we're depressed. If we're sick, we're sick. If we have limit and lack, we have limit and lack. If we are hurting, we're hurting. And then to move from that point.
Yeah. And it's in a sense that trite cliche, let go and let God. If we let go of our worries and fears and aggravation and all the negative aspects of life and just let God's abundance inflow, then we will be healed of whatever the problem.
And as that abundance inflows the circumstance or situation, we'll be guided and directed to the way that we should think, the way that we should act, and the things that we should say in the midst of the circumstance.
Yes. So there's a poem that if you can keep your head when all about you are running amok, and that's true. If we stay, and you know what what that really means is if we stay centered in our lives, then we can accept whatever comes, and we can stay calm and peaceful and happy, and then accept that from other people, and others will pick that up from us. And it makes for a very wonderful flowing of good in life.
And then we have the grace to accept. Dr. Freelander and I have been talking with you in the last few minutes about concepts and ideas of confident living and having the grace to accept circumstance and situation in a positive and affirmative way. We hope you found this information useful. Look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.